This is Granny's garden. I put this together several years ago to show visitors to the Rainforest Medicine Trail and East Chell Farm plants that they would be more familiar with than what they encountered in the rainforest. Here we have plants that you may have in your kitchen cabinet, your backyard garden, or perhaps even the corner grocery store. Here we can learn their common Creole names, Spanish, English, Maya, Latin, their uses, their contraindications, and it's an opportunity for people to become familiar with common Pan-American plants. We're now in Granny's garden. Granny's garden was made to feature plants that would grow on the edge of the forest or in fields where there would be more light and less competition. The reason we started this garden is to show people some plants that they might be using in the kitchen or have in their medicine cabinet in different forms, and also to give people an opportunity to learn about plants that they would encounter in the fields as opposed to being in the forest. This one is called Strongback. It's one of my favorite plants. One of my favorite plants because I sometimes have a backache. And this is a really reliable common household remedy for stiff back or muscle spasms, that type where you bend down and you get up and it feels really like something tore inside. So we use this in a formula that includes the Mexican wild yam and the Strongback. The Strongback has the ability to aid the kidneys in eliminating some acid from the system, which then helps the muscles to relax more. And the Mexican wild yam also helps the kidneys to eliminate some systemic acidity. The Strongback also is a natural antispasmodic remedy. Some people, for instance, in Africa use it as an anti-asthmatic because it's such a reliable antispasmodic so that it relaxes the lungs and the muscles around the lungs so people are able to breathe more clearly. It could be taken as a tea, as a tincture, and I've even heard of some people who dry it and smoke it as a cigarette to relieve their muscle spasms. Strongback has a tiny little purple flower. In the doctrine of signatures, we believe that purple signifies that a plant could be used for pain or for the nervous system. And this one clearly demonstrates that doctrine of signature. It does very well to alleviate the pain of muscle spasms and backache. Strongback. Okay, here's a commonly known plant around the world, lemongrass. Lots of people like to eat it in Thai cuisine. Here it's called fever grass or zacate limon. Fever grass because it's so good for bringing down fevers in infants, children, and adults. It's prepared as a warm tea, and if you add a little touch of honey, it kind of tastes like a liquid popsicle to a child. So it means that they will willingly and eagerly drink their medicine, which is a good thing for mother. And the root system can be pounded and added to oil to be rubbed onto muscle spasms, sore back, sore neck, little sprains of that sort. It's a very useful plant and easy to cultivate in your household garden. Some plants are so useful and so important to household ailments, they become eternally famous. This is one. It's called Life Everlasting, Siempre Viva, and the Tree of Life. It's also called Hoja de Aire. It has a lot of different common names. And when we encounter a medicinal plant with a lot of common names, we know that it has many different names from different cultures because it's so useful, so reliable, and so dramatically effective. This one is an excellent remedy for the skin, whether it be dry, scaly skin, or whether it be skin rashes or baby diaper rash, even sunburn. It's an excellent remedy. You would mash the fresh leaf in water and sprinkle it on the face for pimples or red conditions. You could soak a little baby's butt, let the baby play in water, squeezed from these leaves. Also, they use it as a tea for kidney ailments because it's a wonderful means of bringing out toxicity from the system through the kidneys. It's called Life Everlasting because everywhere that one of these scalloped leaves falls to the ground, every one of those little scallops will become a new plant. In fact, once I took one of these leaves and stuck it in a book, And about 3 months later, I totally forgot that that leaf was in the book. And when I opened the book, several of these little scallops had started making roots, and the roots were going right through the pages, trying to find their way out the book, where I have no doubt they would have sprouted and become new plants. Here's one of the leaves that recently fell to the ground, and you can see where the little baby plant is. Now these leaves with newly sprouted plants on them are a specific remedy unto themselves. This we use for baby asthma. Babies with asthma to the point where every breath they take kind of rattles with mucus in their lungs, and it looks like they're having a difficult time breathing. Mothers will heat this leaf very slightly, squeeze out the juice, and take the pure concentrated juice from the leaf and spoon it into the baby's mouth. They say it alleviates the tightness in the lungs and brings the mucus up. So it's a wonderful remedy for that. And for adult asthma, we have people take 1 teaspoon of the juice of one of these leaves each and every day, probably for as long as 6 months. Some people use the leaf juice for diabetes with good results. So this is one of those plants we could say is a true panacea, good for just about whatever ails you. That's life everlasting. And here is a true universal plant, ginger. Its Latin name is Zingiber officinale. Officinale, again, is given to plants that have been food and medicine since before recorded history. If ever there was a plant that was universally known, available, used just about every single day, we'd have to say it was ginger. The ginger root grated and made into a tea. It's a wonderful tummy ache remedy for adults and children. So it makes a very nice plaster when you boil the grated ginger root, and you soak a cloth in that and lay it over the chest for a person who's having a serious type of a cough or a lung condition, emphysema, or especially a cough that's dry and having a difficult time loosening. That makes a very nice remedy for that, just to lay a plaster of hot ginger tea on top of that. Also, many midwives like to give hot ginger tea all during labor and delivery for the mother. They say that it aids with the opening of the cervix. It helps with the contractions of labor. So it's a wonderful, truly good household universal remedy. Kanye Brava is a jungle plant that grows specifically in areas within the forest where a little bit of sunlight breaks through in a small clearing. Its primary use is for bushmasters when they're traveling in the bush and they might get an eye infection or a pink eye, or even sometimes a sore eye from having had a piece of leaf or a thorn scrape across it. So they cut the stem of a plant and then squeeze out the juice to apply directly into the eye. That's Kanye Brava. There are many plants that we use as household decoratives to beautify our environment. Some of them are actually very good and powerful medicines. This one, for instance, Moses in the Cradle, is a midwifery remedy. Midwives will use this leaf as a tea in a decoction. It means that you boil the water and the leaf together for a certain amount of time for women with uterine conditions such as fibroids, polyps, or cervical abrasions. They would take it as a tea, particularly just before menstruation, and you see the back of the leaf is purple. Now, in the concept of doctrine of signatures, that many plants signify how you might use them on the human body as medicines. By doctrine of signature, the color purple refers to a plant that is useful for pain. So midwives will use this as a tea for women after childbirth to help with the pain of the afterbirth, to help with menstrual cramps, and also sometimes as a bath for pain of backache and headache. So it's a beautiful plant and a very useful plant as well. So if you grow it at home, it would be worth your while to search out a midwife or a traditional healer and try to get instructions on how to use this for a household remedy. That's Moses in the Cradle. This is a common vine that grows along the edges of the forest. It holds onto the tree trunks, trying to reach up towards the sunlight for nutrients. Its primary use is for foot fungus. In the chicle days, the chicleros often wore rubber boots for months at a time. And because of the dampness and the heat, they often got a serious case of foot fungus. What they would do would boil up a section of this and soak their feet in the hot, as hot as a human foot could possibly bear. They would do that every night as they returned home from cutting the chicle trees. And apparently they got excellent results. Some of the old traditional healers will roast the leaves and reduce it to a powdery ash and then sprinkle that over the foot fungus as well. I've seen it get very good results. It's a good plant. Some plants are so useful to human beings that they become extremely famous. This is one, China root or Smilax lanceolata. It's a plant that grows in the depths of the forest. And it has a root system that grows very deeply underground. Sometimes it's an all-day job just to dig up the root system. I saw one of these plants yield 15 pounds of root systems. The roots are quite large, about that big, bright red, and when you chop it to boil it for tea, it looks a lot like red membranes within the human body. It's very, very rich in iron and minerals. So we use it for people who are low of blood or anemic, people who are exhibiting a good deal of exhaustion and tiredness. Scientists have found that the China root contains a base molecule that is very similar to human hormones. So supposedly, if you drank the tea, your body would be able to determine if it would rather build testosterone from that base molecule, estrogen, or progesterone. So we use it for hormonal imbalances in both men and women. Because it's so rich in iron and it tastes so fine, it's got no bad taste whatsoever, it's a good remedy for poor blood, anemia, for people who feel exhausted. It makes a really tasty red, bright colored tea, and that's one of the ingredients in our famous jungle juice, which contains China root, the bark of the gumbo limbo, cinnamon, and hibiscus flowers. 2,000 years ago, the father of medicine, Hippocrates, in the Greek tradition, said, "Let your food be your medicine and your medicine be your food." That's good advice for all of us. This is one of those food and medicine plants, sometimes referred to as pot herbs. This is the famous Mexican nopal, sometimes called nopalitos. They're often chopped and cooked, sometimes sautéed with onion, garlic, and tomato, and eaten with fresh corn tortillas. Sometimes now you can get them in Mexican restaurants as nopal fajitas. It's a really delicious, natural, wild food that you can try in restaurants now, sometimes all around the world. For medicine, it has a lot of uses. Again, this is another panacea. There's a kind of slimy juice on the inside of these padded leaves that has many different applications in healing. Primarily, it is the very best, #1, superior specific remedy for burns. The most serious burn you could imagine, those that come with blisters and infections. Applying that juice to the burn several times a day, to my mind and experience, works even much better than the classical aloe application for burns. Also, the leaf can be applied to the forehead to bring down headache, especially a headache due to overexposure to sun, because it draws the heat out of the forehead. Often the leaf goes on fresh and cool, and in half an hour after the headache is gone, the heat looks as though it's been cooked over a flame. And the leaf juice, again, can be applied as a poultice, just laying the entire leaf over a bruise that's gotten black and blue, where you can actually see that the blood under the surface of the skin has been damaged. It helps a great deal. In fact, sometimes I've seen the bruised blood ooze right into the leaf itself, taking it right out of the injury. And then people who have sprains and even fractures can apply this leaf as a poultice over the sprain and the fracture. So you see why we call it a panacea. It has multiple applications on the human body. That's nopal, tuna, or scogeneal. Now, a warning. if you're going to collect this leaf, it has nearly invisible thorns on its outer surface. And those thorns are quite painful if they get stuck in your skin. And they're so nearly invisible that you have a hard time getting them out because you can't find them. You need a magnifying glass. So when you harvest nopal, it's really advisable to wear gloves. And then when you have the leaf in hand, you want to scrape down over the surface of the leaf, and that breaks off those thorns. Believe me, well worth it. And then you turn it over and do the same thing on both sides. You may not even know that one of these thorns gets embedded in your skin until it starts to burn. All right, so after having done that, cut the leaf in half and then cut it through the center again, slicing right down the middle. And then what we find on the inside, I'll get this right, is a mucilage. That mucilage is the actual healing principle of the plant. That's what we would apply to the burns, the sprains, or the bruises. Those of us who work with medicinal plants for many decades eventually settle on certain plants that are very dear and special to us. They become our favorite plants. They even become our plant allies. One of my very favorites is basil. It actually happens to grow wild in Belize, one of the rare places in the entire world where basil can be found growing in the wild. It has a lot of common names. Parsley is what is referred to by the Creole people, abajacar in Spanish, basil in English, cacaltun in Maya. And its use in both physical and spiritual medicine is what makes it such a special plant. For physical medicine, we use a tea of the leaves for menstrual cramps, sometimes for tummy ache, for sleepless babies. It could be used as a tea. It could also be used as a bath for nervousness, insomnia, especially cranky, upset babies. We use it also for prayer. A Maya traditional healer breaks off a little piece of a branch with leaves on it with a special prayer, giving thanks to the spirit of the plant. I'm going to say that prayer right now before I break off this little stem because it's so precious. I wouldn't dare cut a piece of basil without saying the prayer. I give thanks to the spirit of this plant, and I have faith with all my heart that you will help me to heal the sickness of the people. And we take this little sprig and lay it over the pulse. And into the pulse we say 3 prayers on this side, 3 prayers on this side, and 3 prayers over the forehead. That would be for spiritual diseases like envy, susto, tristeza, those that we mentioned earlier. We also use it for spiritual bathing. For people who have spiritual diseases, besides the prayer, the burning of incense, herbal bathing is essential to their healing. We may recommend that they take a bath with basil 3 times. We may recommend they take a basil bath every Friday for 9 Fridays, depending on the severity of the spiritual disease. So one of my very favorite plants, not just because I'm Italian and I love pesto, but because it's so essential in my healing practice. I couldn't imagine being a traditional healer in Central America without using basil regularly. This is the common pineapple of households and gardens throughout Central America. The very small, very green fruit has a substance called bromelain, and that bromelain is a protein digestive agent. So it's very helpful when you chop that young green fruit, boil it into a tea, to give it to people who have problems digesting protein, such as meat or beans or chicken. Does a good job, and it relieves their indigestion very well. By doctrine of signatures, plants that have the color red in the flower, the leaf, the stem, or the bark are used for skin conditions that are red and rashy, and for the bloodstream, either to build the blood, because in order to exhibit red, they must have iron in order to make red as a chemical, or also to staunch bleeding. The red hibiscus is the midwife's favorite remedy. It's an essential part of her armamentarium of medicinal plants. Midwives will prepare a tea of 9 flowers of hibiscus, 5 open flowers and 4 closed budding flowers. Boil that with a tablespoon of powdered cinnamon in a quart of water for 10 minutes, and then bring it to the delivery cool. After the mother has gone through labor and delivery, she will give her a drink of the hibiscus and cinnamon tea if the bleeding is excessive. For women who have excessive menstruation, it's the same remedy, a tea of hibiscus and cinnamon. It has an astringent power. It also has the mucilage. The little petal and the leaf has that very useful and healthy mucilage in it that seems to coat the membrane of the uterus in order to help it to stop bleeding. And if there is menstrual cramping, it helps every contraction of the uterus to be that much more efficient and less painful. And these little petals are edible as well. They taste fine. They actually taste rather sweet. So we give them to children with anemia. Sometimes a child who is anemic is reluctant to drink their teas and their remedies, but almost every child is willing to eat 5 or 6 of these little petals each day. Sometimes 1 flower a day after 9 days is enough to build their blood from anemic to strong and healthy. That's our red hibiscus or tulipan. Creole gal, sometimes referred to as purple maguey. Traditional healers take the fresh leaf with the stem. It's very important that the stem and the leaf be gathered together. They chop it and add it to salves and ointments. In a salve or an ointment, it's a superior remedy to stop the itching of mosquito bites. Also works very well when one comes in contact with toxic plants like poisonwood. And then it also prevents infection of bites and stings. So it's a good household remedy to know about because we're going to come in contact with mosquitoes and sometimes toxic plants. So that's our Creole gal. The fields around Central America, anywhere in the world as a matter of fact, provide us with some of our most important medicinal plants that require full sunlight to grow as opposed to the trees and vines that grow in the shade of the forest. This one, for instance, is a member of the nightshade or the tomato family. It's called wild eggplant because its fruits look a little bit like an eggplant. It has a purple flower, and in doctrine of signature, purple flowers signify a plant that is good for the nervous system or for pain. So one of its common uses is as a tea or a tincture for hysteria or pain or extreme nervous conditions. I did see it used as a bath washing treatment for severe burns, and I must say it really works wonderfully. It's a charm the way it takes all of the infected skin off the burn, breaks open the blister, and then within the first bath, that very serious burn is often 50% improved. It may require a second or a third bath, but it makes a person extremely comfortable after a very serious burn. In fact, I had that experience myself of using it as a skin bath after a severe kitchen burn. That's wild eggplant or susumba in Maya. Orange trees love the white calcium soils of Belize, just like they do in Jamaica. The leaves of the orange tree are very useful medicinally. People drink the orange leaf as a tea to cause perspiration, to bring down fevers. They also use that perspiration to alleviate hangovers, or crudo, as it's called here in Central America. So a good wife would prepare her husband a special tea made with 9 orange leaves in the morning after he's drunk, give him that hot orange leaf tea and allow him to perspire and help him through that difficult stage of the after-drink hangover. We also use it for babies with fever as a bath as well as a tea. And for tummy aches, the simplest thing to do is to take a piece of the leaf, which has that delightful orange or citral aroma. The citral is an essential oil, and essential oils act very favorably on the digestive tract by opening the ducts of the digestive organs to pump more enzymes into the stomach to help with digestion. So for indigestion, the traditional healers recommend you take a small piece of the orange leaf, chew on it. Don't swallow the leaf, but just swallow the juices, and you get the benefit of the citral, and it works really well. Not too long ago, I was downtown in San Ignacio, and a little 8-year-old boy who had a few months earlier been on the Rainforest Medicine Trail with his class came running up to me and he said, Miss, that orange leaf you taught me about a few months ago, that thing really worked, that thing good. It does, try it, it really works. Good for tummy ache, orange leaf. Besides providing the world with a delicious and nutritious fruit, the banana plant itself has many useful medicinal properties. This leaf right here is cut off at the stem and then taken into smaller pieces and wrapped around severe burns. Several years ago, I was in the burn unit of a hospital in Guatemala City, and every patient in the burn unit was wrapped with banana leaves. And when I spoke to the doctor, he said that, well, we use it because it's the best thing. There's nothing better than banana leaves for severe burns. He said that it helps with the pain, it prevents infection, and it aids the healing better than any other known plant remedy. Now, the root of the banana is like a ball. It's a whitish ball about so big depending on the size of the tree. That root can be dug up, washed, and grated, much like you would grate a potato. You squeeze out the juice, and that juice is given by the spoonful to women who have postpartum hemorrhage or extreme bleeding after delivery. They say, the midwives say, that 1 teaspoon is enough to stop serious hemorrhage, and that they are always very cautious and careful about giving the 2nd teaspoonful because it may be too much. So if the hemorrhaging hasn't stopped within 5 minutes, they may administer a 2nd teaspoon. Besides that, the juice that's inside of the trunk of the banana plant is an indelible brown dye. And we know for sure that the ancients used that juice to dye wool and threads and cloth. It's a rusty brown color, and there is no way you can wash that out of your clothing if you get it on you when you cut down a banana plant to get the banana racine. And that's our wonderful banana, or musa. There were many plants mentioned in the Bible as useful since ancient times for medicine for human beings. The aloe plant is one of those biblical plants. Here it's called Cinkum Bible. Cinkum Bible, or aloe, as most everybody knows, is very useful for treating burns. We also use it to draw fish scales out of a person's heel or foot, or you come in contact with the fish scale, or you touch a fish and the scale embeds into your skin. We apply a poultice of a pure aloe leaf, and it draws the splinter or the fish scale out of the skin. Some people also use it as a laxative agent by just drinking the liquid on the inside of the leaf. Other people use it for headaches by laying it down on a piece of cloth and applying that to the forehead. It's a very good and a useful plant. It's certainly one of the most important ones to have around in your household garden for kitchen burns, sunburn. All of those red, rashy skin conditions would be greatly alleviated by applying aloe. Some plants become really famous. This is no doubt the most famous, the most well-known plant in all of Central America. This is Sora C, Condiamor Momordica tarantia. As far as we know, it has more than 100 common names throughout the world. It even grows in India, where it's called Kerala. In Belize, people say that your remedy should be bitter. They say the bitter, the better. This is one of the most important bitters as a household remedy. Grannies and mothers give this to their children to build the blood, to prevent infestation of intestinal parasites, to kill amoebas, and basically to treat any type of foreign organism that tries to live in or on the human body. They might squeeze the juice and apply that to ringworm or skin fungus. And then people drink a tea of the leaves and the fruits for diabetes, with actually very good results. This is one of the plants that was well researched at Kew Gardens in London for its anti-diabetic properties. That's Sora C, or Con d'Amore. Everybody knows and loves oregano for its use in spaghetti sauce and soups and stews. It really adds a delightful flavor and aroma to just about anything you'd like to cook in the kitchen. Lots of people, however, are unaware of its very wonderful use as a medicinal plant. We use oregano as a tea for lung conditions such as infections, and then also as a tea for delayed menstruation or painful periods. And one of its really wonderful uses is when you have a sprain. Say if you fall and sprain your wrist or your ankle, you can soak a cotton cloth in a strong decoction of oregano tea and leave it on for an hour or so and change it 3 or 4 times a day. And you'll find that it really helps a great deal with the healing, the pain. It even causes a numbing sensation in the acute pain on the very first day. I'd say that if you had a serious sprain in your ankle and you used oregano tea as a poultice, instead of limping around for 10 days, you'd probably be up and about in about 3 days. Midwives like to use oregano as a vaginal steam bath to give to women maybe 9 days after they deliver a baby, to make sure that all the material from the uterus is properly cleaned out. It prevents infection in the uterus, and it also helps the uterus to return to its normal position after childbirth. That's the oregano. This is a truly ubiquitous plant. Amaranth, the Latin name is Amaranthus retroflexus. Here in Belize, we know it as callaloo. This plant grows all over the world. Its origin is in Central America, or the Old World, and it was eventually carried by seed to the New World and has now made its way all across Europe. We love this plant because it's such delicious food. We use it like anyone would use garden spinach. We make a soup out of it. We saute it with onion and garlic and add it over brown rice. We could make a drink out of callaloo. It's very rich in iron, minerals, and protein. And the seeds of amaranth are also very edible. They are sometimes now sold in health food stores around the world. So the seed can be dried and harvested, roasted and ground and added to bread, put into tortillas. So together the plant makes a really perfect food. In 6 weeks from sowing the seeds, you have a plant about this big, which means in 5 or 6 weeks you're able to harvest food that you can eat immediately. Medicinally, lots of people like to use the amaranth leaves as a bath for children with measles or chickenpox. And they say it does a nice treatment on the skin of preventing the infection, preventing bleeding, and scarring as well. So that's our beloved amaranth, or callaloo. If it grows near you, you should certainly try it. This is Achote, Bixa orellana, also known as the lipstick tree. It's famous, it's beautiful, and it's a cultivar. It's not a wild tree. You would never find this in the forest. It has to be cultivated by human beings. It's famous for its pods. Inside the pod is, get these ends off, inside the pod are little seeds. And each of these seeds is full of a red dye, which is why it's called the lipstick tree. And the red dye is what the native people would use for body painting, body decoration, body art, and of course you could use it for rouge and lipstick as well. It has a number of medicinal purposes. Because the tree has this bright red characteristic in the seed pod, it gives us a clue, again, back to doctrine of signature. This is a favorite remedy for kidney inflammation, for bladder infection, and for bathing children who have measles or chickenpox. All of those, the inflammation is rather red. The chickenpox and the measles are also red. So for the kidney and the bladder, you would make a tea of the leaves and drink it instead of water. You might take 2 quarts in a day. For children with measles and chickenpox, we would gather a good bucketful of the leaves, boil them up, and when it's cool, bathe the children. It stops the itching of the measles and the chickenpox. It brings down the inflammation, and it helps with the entire healing process of that childhood disorder very quickly. It's a wonderful tree. Besides being beautiful, useful, also these little pods produce a spice called Achote, which can be purchased in just about any marketplace in Central America. It's used as a coloring agent and also a spice for chicken sauces, beef, and different foods and dishes like that.